Hey, we're back with another episode of the Redscroll podcast. I'm Rick.
I'm Josh.
We're here with Mikey Daddona of Ratskin Records and a bunch of other projects.
Hello, what's up,
And
Ross.
We've talked about Ross a bunch on this show because we've had a bunch of his bandmates because he's in a bunch of bands.
He's the last member of Mountain Movers to be on the podcast.
That's true.
Finally here, y'all.
Got his way in. Yeah. Ross comes up almost every episode.
Just because everybody's in a band with Ross.
It's true.
Taking up all that space, huh? And me and Ross have a band, OSC, that we stole from other people, right? Who did we steal it from? Other people that aren't here, Patrick.
Like our friends, they were part, But we're running with it, though. It's fine.
All right, we'll get into this later.
First, we're going to that coming in 3 years.
So first of all, what Josh is listening to.
Sure, I'll go first. Start backwards. I probably mentioned on the last podcast, but the new Dead Can Dance Dionysus on Pious Records. That's been like every morning before coffee, like as I'm getting stuff ready here at the shop. This one's Ross related. So the Dire Wolves Headroom split, that's been heavy for me. I heard that when the tape came out months ago, Karen was able to snag one of those in the mail because she keeps up on that. So I had heard it before, but having it is pretty awesome. Realized Demolition on To Live a Lie. It's the bassist from Sex Prisoners' Godflesh Worship rip-off industrial project, but it's a little bit more moshy than slam. I don't think you can get away from the mosh. City Hunter, Deep Blood on Youth Attack, members of Spectral Voice and Culture Shock, and it's probably the best thing Youth Attack has put out since Hoax. And then Chris Corsano, Bill Orchid, Brace Up on Polilia Records, which is just like freak out music. That's pretty much it for new stuff.
Yeah, there's a lot of that in the Bay Area. Maybe we'll talk about that. Go.
Oh, good. Mikey's producing this episode. This is good. A lot of what I'm listening to is stuff from this past year that didn't make the show last month, which was like our favorites of 2018 show. That I'm sort of catching up on stuff. So this is stuff that might have made it if we did the show this week. Sarah Davachi gave in rest on Bada Bing. Then we got Kali Malone, Cast of Mind, which is on that Swiss label Hallow Ground. She plays buchla, got woodwind and brass in there, and it's real good droning stuff. A lot of what I've been catching up on has been the drums. And then Lucy Railton, Paradise 94 Modern Love. She's a cellist / composer. Half the record is almost like a collage piece, and then the other half of the record is more leaning on her cello. And then something that's not exactly new is they're doing a bunch of the 90s reissues for the band For Against, the Nebraska like post-punk new wave-ish band, and that band rules, and I can't think of any other band from Nebraska that rules. And there's a bunch of 90s reissues done, and Capture Tracks released like all the early stuff a few years back, and that still rules.
Wastoid.
So, Mikey, what are you listening to?
Let's see. Well, I got to start with that 700 Bliss, Spa 700. But that's more Mother and DJ Haram, which is kind of grime, industrial, trap. Yeah, it's really all over the place. Totally phenomenal. I hope they put out an LP coming up. And still, actually, that more Mother Fetish Bones on Don Giovanni from 2 years ago. I still haven't heard anything better than that. That record is totally surreal, and every white person should be required to listen to it at least once a week. So, and what else? The Ives Two More, Safe in the Hands of Love. I really like that record a lot too. I just also just seeing more black and brown artists taking up space in that type of experimental music, and I saw them play at a party this year, and it was so much different than that record, so that was really interesting to see. Also, sort of, actually at that same party was another thing, Baby Mother, who just dropped Mother's Day 3. Really interesting use of like her kids in her work, and it's just really heavy, sort of industrial female rap, just really good stuff. that Hero Cone on the expenditure. I don't remember the title, but that record's amazing.
It is. That record's really good.
You know what it's called? I can't remember.
I can't remember the name.
Pure Expenditure, I think. Deus Records.
I end up saying that new one on most shit.
Yeah.
That new one.
That new one.
Bee's Nest, History of Sexual Violence, self-release tape. A really, really heavy concept new age drone record. So much other stuff. Wizard Apprentice, which we just put out a tape of, which we'll talk about that a little bit later. But she released a bunch of live videos that are just really phenomenal alternate versions of the tape that won't really be released on anything. They're just available digital. And Fazul is dropping a tape tomorrow, but I've been listening to the files for the last couple weeks. That's phenomenal. Club Chai Collective out of Oakland. So, yeah, and a bunch of other stuff, but stop there for now.
Ross, what you got?
I just at work today. I listened to the Sky Fiera LP. It's called like Nighttime, and it is like, I don't know. It's a couple of years old. I feel like she's kind of a one-hit wonder, but it's just fun. I don't know.
Fun for the juice bar.
Yeah, it was good for that. You know.
You gotta keep the energy up.
Yeah. I'm a mess with like figuring out what to listen to all the time. There's a record I like, pronounce it, Kaja Bonet. It's on a record on Fat Possum. I got a sampler from here a while ago, and it was just one song. I was like, oh, this is really good, where the rest of it just sucked. And it's just sort of like kind of new, kind of like psych soul kind of stuff, just really delicate, beautiful. I've listened to that quite a bit the past couple months. There's a Mr. Fingers LP, I think, that came out that's called Cerebral Hemispheres, that was just went through a couple different vibes, but just really, I don't know, really nice, just really nice tracks. That was cool. I've listened to a little bit recently. It's tough. There's this a Late in the Attic comp. It's called Turkish Ladies. That's runs a gamut from like kind of disco stuff to more folk pop. That was pretty fun. I listened to a Green Day CD today in the car. That was
Which one?
Weird. Older. It was maybe like Something Road, or what? Maybe it was Kerplunk.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
It was the sound of the snare like was completely off-putting for the first track, and I think they mixed it down again. But it was crazy how bad it was. That was kind of fun. I kind of low-key like pop punk, you know, certain things.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's okay. I'm just gonna. It's really tough to think off the top of my head. About
That's enough, man. You don't need to keep going.
Cool.
Pop punk is not okay though.
But
We'll talk about that later.
We can talk about that.
Didn't Green Day share a practice space with Neurosis? So it's all good.
They might.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, they. Yeah. I mean, you know, they. They. We'll talk about that later. But yeah, they did. Yeah, I mean, probably more like Neurosis shared a space with Green
How
Day,
late are
but-
we gonna be here?
It's just gonna get
This is live. No, it is not live. Yeah, so let's go back to when you lived in Connecticut full time, Mikey. For those who don't know, Mikey runs Ratskin Records, and he's in the Oakland Bay Area, and he is a Connecticut expat.
That's right.
Yeah, but let's go back to when you were in Connecticut. Talk about getting into punk. Talk about your friendship with Josh in the early years.
Hanover House, Josh, and you know, I mean, probably really the only reason that Ratskin exists was in a lot of ways because of Josh. So, you know, it's nice to come full circle to this. You know, putting together the first Redscroll release, I See Dead People comp. You know, that was really the first sort of thing that I would ever do that would be considered anything to, you know, of being like a record label or anything like that, or even I was barely even doing my any music at that point. I mean, had a band, my first step toward failure. But that was my first introduction to punk or hardcore or any sort of extreme music was Hanover House, basically. And or I don't remember where the first show that I went to was, but
you were a big Misfits kid.
Yeah, but so I guess I met through Ross, and I mean Misfits, but I guess even like now thinking of that connection, I mean it's so far from experimental music, right? But they
no, that's the jump point.
Yeah. But in terms of producing anything, myself, I think just I mean, I played a little bit of music with Dean. Probably was the first person I ever played with.
Oh, true, yeah.
So,
shout out to our friend Dean.
Right.
He's super into like Rush and Primus.
Right.
Last time I
Primus,
saw him, he mentioned Les Claypool like 40 times in like 2 hours. It was crazy.
Yeah, it sounds about right.
He's amazing, though. We love you, Dean.
So I think just definitely my sort of the beginnings of getting into any sort of extreme music, and probably Neurosis or Wrench in the Works, just hearing stuff like that, Today Is a Day, but Neurosis really was a bridge to get into more experimental music. Tribes of Narot was their sort of offshoot band, and now I run into like Noah the synth player, and I mean I've got to put them out on compilations, so it's like once but at that time for me that was like that music specifically was a big bridge into some people get into noise from Merzbow or all these John Cage, or depending on what your point of orientation is, or through free jazz, more black and brown music. But my sort of one of my entry points was hardcore or metal or whatever, abstract metal. So and I think now the stuff that it's more about the philosophy behind it really than a certain style. So
so to lay it out for people who don't know, me and Mikey did start Redscroll as a label in 1999, year 2000, which is pretty much when I met Ross in 98, 99. I met you shortly after.
Right.
And then you are the one who told me that I should start a label because I wasn't in a band. And we kind of hashed it out, and I don't know why we thought compilation's the way to go, but since then you've kind of become a master of the CDR compilation.
It all stems from that for sure. There's no doubt about it.
You like making a mix is really what it boils down to. So we did that first release, like sloppy CDR. And then we put out the first 7-inch, which was like a super learning experience.
Yeah.
And then you stuck with it through the following release, and then after that you kind of went your separate way because that's about the time you started going to school and doing a whole other thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, we did the A Day's Refrain Barstow split, which was the last thing you were involved in, and we almost did a 7-inch by, what was the pop punk band in Connecticut? Was it The Scheme? Had the female keyboard player?
That was Sean's band, yeah.
Yeah, Sean's band. We had asked them if they wanted to do a 7-inch outside Brass City, and they're like, nah, let's do a CD. And you said, nope, and you walked away. That was the last. Seriously, I couldn't even find MP3s.
Because I thought that, didn't we talk about, maybe it wasn't going to be on Redscroll, but what about, weren't we supposed to do a split with the Assistant Side Project? You remember the name Tashar Clandada? Was that it?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Just couldn't get it to happen for whatever reason. And then I tried to push them off on doing a split with Wrench, and they didn't want to do that.
Right, and that was
that was pretty much that. But and then you moved to California 2005.
2000, end of 2004.
Yeah, end of 2004, because Ratskin started in 2005.
Yeah,
so the first release came out 2005.
2005, yeah.
And you're creeping up to, you have planned through release 80. So
Yeah, well, planned through about 100, but the numbers are...
well, I mean, where things are actually rolling.
Yeah, we'll see. I think for sure the next 5 will happen. So hopefully many more.
Yeah. So you want to talk about, because you've had 3 releases this year or 4 releases this year?
Yeah, 3 releases. There was a few LPs that I thought would happen this year that it didn't happen. So those are going to come out in the first half of next year. Chucha Santa Maria is going to be the first out of, I think, 4 or 5 LPs that are going to come out next year. So that's going to be in March. That's really a pretty interesting conceptual dance record by this duo, Sofia Cordova and Matt Kirkland. Both Oakland, pretty established visual artists, and it's really pretty phenomenal record all over the place. Most of the lyrics aren't in English, which is actually pretty refreshing. It's really all over the place in terms of different styles, but it's pretty much a sort of deep anti-capitalist dance record. So it's interesting to see blend these really sort of pretty radical concepts with like pretty palatable, like almost like pop music. So that's been really interesting. And
I mean, I would say that, I mean, your last 3 or 4 releases have been more of a synth pop, neo soul.
Yeah, well, the
funk.
spelling.
Yep.
And with the exception of Disappearing, which was pretty much a Harsh Noise wall tape, which came out earlier in the beginning of the year. We just did 50 copies of that. But the spelling, which the LP just came out about 14 days ago. That's been a real pleasure to do that record.
I don't know if you noticed, but people are trying to sell the tape version of that for over $100.
Yeah, I saw, which is just like, okay, I guess I just need to do another edition of the tape. I saw that, had a few people like message me like, can you dub me a tape for $20? And I was like, you should really just buy the download and dub it to a tape yourself. The download's $7. So, it's not like a screen printed tape. You could just really, you could just make your own. I don't know. I think that's, it's a phenomenal record, and really, I think she blends as sort of a couple different acts I've heard do a sort of kind of industrial soul hybrid in really interesting ways. Ono is another act that comes to mind from Chicago, but yeah, Pantheon of Me, check that out because that was a lot of fun to release. Truly pretty wide record, concept wise and sound wise.
At this point, how are you deciding which format to release on? Because it seems like you fall back to tapes for 2 or 3 releases, and then you put out an LP. Like, is it strictly like how many you think you could sell, or do you try to keep things limited on purpose?
Well, frankly, I'd love to be able to put out everything on LP. Just the money's not there. If I really, in some ways, do leave it up to the artist in terms of if they absolutely think the work needs to be on LP, if that's really going to truly be its best form, then we'll strive for that. I think putting out a record, I enjoy working with artists of different sort of levels where they're at, creatively and in their creative development. So, but if an artist hasn't had a record before, and maybe that's something that that's an artist that maybe that work should be on LP, right? Versus another artist that maybe we want to work with, but maybe they already have labels that can already put out their records and have already done that. So, although we would want to work with some of those artists, like I would rather, I think that's something we sort of pride ourselves upon is working with artists maybe necessarily like before they're of a certain echelon of popularity. I mean, Sacred Bones is putting out the next Spelling record, for instance.
Yep.
They bumped it up, and they announced that, basically a week after we, and that's when they asked her, we're not going to get the details, but I'm just saying it's interesting to see just how all that stuff works. So that's why we were excited to put out the record, to get it out there. But really, it's it really is case by case. Is the work not going to sound as good on vinyl? Sometimes electronic music in a certain style may not actually sound better on vinyl, depending on what the content is. So it really is a case by case basis. But yes, and also artists that we usually put out a record with, in some cases, maybe we've already done a tape or a CD.
Yep. And
maybe that's sold. Maybe it totally hasn't sold out. But I mean, at this point, most of the releases are. We have a few records and there's a few copies of a few tapes left. But everything is pretty much, aside from the newest releases, is sold out, and you can get it all online for free or cheap. So most of it's on SoulSeek too. So.
And you're a real lover of Bandcamp.
I do. I like Bandcamp a lot. I think I do appreciate the sort of infrastructure that comes along with it. I think they, in terms of even just like music journalism, I think actually they do produce some pretty wide, consistently interesting pieces. I think some of them could be a little bit narrowing, and maybe there's just some bands that don't want to be on there, or artists that don't want to be on there for certain reasons, and you don't want to totally limit your scope to that. So I guess they could expand it more, but in terms of taking a percentage, like they're fairly and they've been fairly supportive of us as a label in general. So
as opposed to Spotify or whatever, that you're paying to get it up there.
00067. The Wizard Apprentice record has been, which also just came out back in October, and people really took to it. And I was a little worried because it was almost like a conceptually minimal, like spoken word, very minimal techno record, but without the drums and with maybe just like one synth line. So but the artwork for that is it's obviously like a very gritty old photo, but it's taken almost 2 weeks for them to even approve it, because we had to actually alter the album art because they said, you have to put some really clear text so that the checker knows that it's not just a low pixel count or whatever, and it's just like it's 10 megabytes for a JPEG, so it's obviously big enough. So just that as a metaphor for like how that whole system works, I think is just like, I think Bandcamp and being able to give your music away for free at high quality streaming and not have to pay someone like SoundCloud or something to do it. I do want to have all the releases on Spotify and stuff like that, but I don't think that should be the end-all be-all for being on like a popular playlist.
Sure.
I think the PR stuff is getting a little out of hand. So I think paying to be on a Spotify playlist is a bit excessive, I think. But at the same time, that's how so many people are sharing stuff. So
Well, most PR is like, the idea of it is, most of it is pretty excessive. Like the idea that you're paying a company basically just to use their email blast list.
Right, exactly.
Unless you're playing with large sums of money
and have it come from the right person.
Yeah.
So I think
it's just paying for access, basically.
Yeah. So, and I think that whole process, I know this is straying a little bit from the question, but I just think that whole process, I think Bandcamp is pretty good about just sort of stepping back and being like, okay, they have some things that are a little bit weird, but I think they've stepped in for sort of certain parts of the community in ways which other services would never, because they might be worried about losing followers, or this is too radical, or why are they doing a benefit for disabled people or trans people. So I just think a company that is a little bit more aligned with like the philosophy of stuff that we're doing anyway. I don't exclusively, but they've made it easier to sell records. Definitely for sure, people go on there and buy stuff in ways that they never really did off when I just had a website. And I'm a firm believer of like having a just very bare bones like functional website that's just documentation. I think that's the way that people should learn about the label, because it has everything there. So but I think Bandcamp's great. That's the long-winded version.
Yeah
That's pretty much that question.
Talk about. I'm gonna bring it back again. So when you first move out to the Bay Area, talk about getting acclimated there, and what drew you, like, in the direction that you went.
Well, I really just met this guy Andre. I was going to SFAI. I got a partial scholarship there, and it was like one of the only San Francisco Art Institute, and it was basically the only place I got accepted to go to college, and for still reasons that I'm somewhat unclear about. Yeah, I chose to do that, and so I met someone there, started jamming pretty quickly, and we started a thing called Saber Teeth, which was sort of just like rock, kind of angular rock.
Noise rock.
Yeah, noise rock, I guess you would say. And we sort of started Ratskin out of his house. He lived kind of on the outskirts of San Francisco, and they may have actually sort of haphazardly picked the name, and they were like, oh, we had this, name. I think that was actually going to be the name of Saber Teeth originally, or that's what they were calling it. But then I was like, nah, but I was like, yeah, I think it's a good label name. So, we chose that, and just, making demo, I don't know why it seemed like a good idea to have, a fake label or a real label, but really fake. I mean, it's just, you don't really need, it's like a CDR in an envelope, it doesn't need to, someone just needs to listen to it and decide if they want to book you at their laundromat, like it doesn't, but for whatever reason, we decided to put a label name on it, and did a couple more, did a 7-inch. It did okay, but it wasn't really, it took a while also, because that was the first vinyl that I did since that split 7-inch. So and Josh pretty much, I didn't even, I mean, I think maybe I looked at the forums, but you pretty much handled all that. So that was, and it wasn't really representative of the sound we were going for anyway. It kind of ended up sounding like this, like weird, just like, I was like, this just sounds like kind of like bar rock with some screaming with one like super fast hardcore song on it, which was fun. But yeah, so but we decided to do a big compilation after that. 200 songs, 13 seconds, 13-second songs from a whole bunch of different projects, noise, rock, electronic, pretty much all over the map. And then, yeah, just from there, got more gratification out of putting out either compilations or other people's music a little bit more. I think was more gratifying than, I think you could just, even before like the internet was big with music promotion or art promotion, I think, it's like you can only tell your friend to listen to your like band so many times, like they either like it or they don't. You know, so at some point you kind of just have to like. I think that's the weird thing. It's like you, even as a small label or artist, you kind of have to find a balance where you're like not hammering stuff in people's faces, but it's other people's work too. So if you believe in it, then you should be promoting it to the best of your means and ability, right? So, yeah, I think it's about finding the balance, and I think, just with each release, we just try to find the balance a little bit better, of just, how to, because why is recorded music important? Because it's documentation, and because people can find out about it later. They could buy it now, but also, I mean, so many records in here. I mean, maybe 20% of them are from the last 2 years, if that, right? Or maybe it's more, but
that's not a thing I ever thought to think about.
I don't know.
I mean, a lot of them
20%
are, right?
seems heavy for just 2 years, but
we do carry a lot of.
There's a lot of new stuff, but
right. No, I know that. I'm not trying to dog. I mean,
no. It's just a hard. It's just a hard number.
Out yet. I'm just saying.
You're making us think about a hard statistic.
But I'm saying, think about that from the perspective of a someone like me who maybe puts out a record and is like, oh shit, I actually still have. Maybe we sold 30 off the bat, but there's still 300 in my room, right?
Yeah.
So, that could be demotivating, but. I feel like if you care about the music, and you can find the time and the resources, then a small label can sustain. So just trying to sustain at this point. But
now, when about 2007, I came out to see you when you were living in San Francisco. So I caught a Sabretooth show. I saw where you were at as far as like, footing in the community. And then, a few years later, I went out again. And by that time, you were running the most elaborate DIY venue that I've not encountered anything
really
since. Well, I mean, so you're at that point, LCM was fully functioning, and it was a venue with obviously a room big enough for bands to be playing in, but also an apartment for the bands to sleep in that night, a kitchen for them to eat in. There was functioning shower, and a tiny record store running a distro out of there, and then a patio area where everyone can hang out. And for a DIY space, that's pretty huge. Not to mention that it was in a rough neighborhood, but it was gated and secured,
for the most part.
Most part,
it got broken into a couple times, but it was never.
I mean, during the shows, and stuff, you were well secured. So I was thoroughly impressed with what you were doing in just a matter of a few years. You had not just immersed yourself in the scene, but really started pulling it in your own direction.
That's good. You never told me you were impressed. No.
Well, I was. Yeah, so, I mean, and you guys ran that space successfully for a few years.
Well, I think about 4.5 years, and I mean, my friend moved back in. It did get sold, so it's probably, so it was over in the collective sense. I mean, they still have a show every couple months, but. It's not, people are living there now, so it's much, much different. There's not the record store, but and, for a while, it definitely sustained, a big part of the community for different styles. I mean, sort of more focused on experimental music, but I mean, we had, all sorts of bands play there, from more, metal stuff to, like Sutek Hexen, and, just, I mean, some of Aaron Turner's projects have played there, but to more, we've had tons of experimental hip hop there, and, I think it takes a while to build up a space where people can really feel safe, and where you could, just the ebb and flow, that on any given night you can have a pretty good crowd, it may not be, 150 people for every show, but you could book a little bit riskier shows and know that at least the touring bands will, even if they're not making $300 that night, they'll probably end up with some food. There's some weed and a bong in the back. They'd probably end up with some free records from the store. And if we sold some, we would keep the store during open shows. So if we sold stuff from the store, we just use that money to, buy, so maybe there was only 15 people there, but we might buy $100 worth of merch, so, sure. So it was, that's sweet when you're on tour, if that's sort of unexpected. So, so that ran for about 5 years. And
I mean, but 5 years in DIY venue terms is huge, especially when you're dealing on that scope.
It's like dog years or something.
Yeah. And some of the downfalls of it, like you mentioned, these break-ins, ironically were from the punk house next door, which didn't, which was not
it was like it was like white Oogle punks that it's a historically black neighborhood, so it's definitely not like, and you have to have respect for that too. Some of the first, literally the first Black Panther house in Oakland was 350 feet away, and this was an old Baptist church that the venue was in. So there is history of the neighborhood. So when it got to the point where people were just, coming it started to get really out of hand, where like a lot of people, and just the demographic of it changed. We didn't know most of the people who were coming to these shows. So that's when it, it's hard to be inclusive, but know when to cut it off.
Right. So,
and who is allowed, but you have to, that's why it's important that people sort of talk to each other and sort of know and just be familiar with, what's happening, because it can get out of control quick, and then it's just not that different than a bar with like just live music or whatever, so.
But even less secure in that sense because it is no longer so much a public space, it's partially a private space.
Right, exactly.
So it's not the same as like being in a bar with sketchy people, then you're in like I'm in this private building with sketchy people.
Right.
So but I mean I think that you guys did a really good job.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean it's and hope we'll have another iteration of it soon. We'll see.
The one time I was there, I saw Roger Stella. It was definitely life-changing. So thank you, Mikey.
What do you remember who you saw? Did you see a show?
No, I didn't see a show.
Okay.
We had a barbecue.
That's right. Okay, okay.
But I mean, I didn't need to see a show to see the space.
Right.
Yeah, but the first time I came out, I saw Sabreteeth play at a weird bar upstairs. It was almost like a saloon.
Chemo's probably, I think it was, which has been closed down and turned to a karaoke lounge.
It was weird. I didn't sleep for like 24 hours, and then I walked outside of the bar, and my hotel just happened to be across the street because I had no idea where I was in town. I was just like, oh shit, like that's where my bed is.
You may have saw the luggage store, I think, yeah. But also closed down. Well, no, I guess they're still open, but.
But I mean, do you want to talk about that? Like the fact that you moving from San Francisco to Oakland is pretty much what everyone else has done.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I mean, so everyone gets priced out of San Francisco. I couldn't even in 2000. I lived there for about 2 years at that point. 2006, we had already lost our place. The first place I ended up being essentially what turned into a Russian mafia trap house. So, which me and a good buddy of mine who now is married with a kid, so I'm not going to drop his name, but we lived in, he ended up actually participating in Styrofoam Sanchez and Coral Remains many years later, but we just ended up in this place, and we didn't realize it at first. It seemed like the roommate just was kind of into Modest Mouse, and he was an acoustic guitar teacher, and like didn't really think anything of it. I was like, okay, he just spends a lot of time in his room, but I go in there with a joint one day, and as he knocking on the door, oh, you want to smoke? And I open the door, and there's this huge cloud of smoke, and I was like, that's not, I smoke a lot of weed. I was like, that's not weed. I was like, you smoking crack, dude? What is that? And it turns out he was like, oh no, it's crystal meth or whatever. And I was just kind of taken aback. I was like, okay, I've been living here for 6 months, and that turns into his dealer's girlfriend moves in, and then now there's bags of pills, and then now there's, actually, hey, you want 2 months free rent, you have to stash this bag in your room, and there's guns in the bag. So I was like, okay, we really gotta, and my buddy he had moved in because his mom essentially came from the East Coast, kicked him out of his apartment, bear with me, so he was living over there, okay? So that is really what forced me. I moved out a week later. The FBI raided the place looking for this guy who was stashing stuff there. So I stayed in a hostel for a week, and I found this Craigslist ad for this place in Oakland, and I called it up. It seemed too cheap, so I almost didn't call it because I thought it was a scam, and called it up, and we put a deposit down the next day or a couple days later, and then that's the same spot I've essentially been at for like 12 years. So.
Oh wow.
So yeah, exactly.
It just seemed like in the times I went to San Francisco in 2005, 2007 to like 2010. By 2010, it looked like nothing was going on in San Francisco.
No, it had
anymore.
already been almost completely. Yeah. Most of the venues had closed down. I mean, there's still some, but yeah, and even now it's 10 times. If you came back now, it would look almost totally different. So, and even Oakland is being annexed. So, artists and bands and longtime residents are being gentrified out of the greater Oakland now, even East Oakland, which is notoriously like, that's just the bad part of town or whatever. People have, now even rich developers are looking there to buy up land. So really, it's if I lost my place now, I'd probably move back here. So because there's just there's nowhere to live, and there's this strong electronic community there, and but it's taken a while to build that, and yeah, so that's where I'm at now, basically, same spot. Well, I think that's how I got over to Oakland. So
Ratskin Records was named by other folks. Did they also combine the first two words on their own, or did you do that? I'm just wondering because Redscroll has a similar thing going on.
We're both RSR.
We also are both RSR.
Oh, yeah,
of course, the biggest of the RSRs is not affiliated, Regurgitated Semen Records overseas. That's the one that comes up first when you search.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. If you search RSR,
We should
that's
do
the
a
cat number.
DDoS attack on them.
I don't know. It seems like a fine label, other than the name is terrible.
Right. Yeah, it's a terrible name. So other than the basis for the whole...
Other than the... I mean,
Well, yeah, no, I mean, Ratskin... Oh, I mean,
Yeah.
Styrofoam Sanchez, so, I mean, and, the... I think a lot of times it's but there was a little bit of that in there for sure. I squished the name together.
You did, okay.
I did, but I think a lot of these things you don't think about it a lot on the front end, and then you're kind of stuck with it, and then you're just like, okay, well, it's more work to change.
People
it
ask
now,
about
so.
Redscroll all the time, and it's the smartest decision may have ever made because it makes you incredibly Googleable.
Yeah.
If you want to search Redscroll, there's nothing that comes up besides this and some African law project.
And now the Brazilian movie.
But we're on top.
Right.
You search Ratskin.
Yeah.
Nobody's doing taxidermy
There's
with rats. It's just you.
There's some cartoon that shows up on archive.org from like 1942. But that's
all right.
it. So
it's
it's
good.
like all I got to do is beat that out. Which got about 4,000 views. So I'm almost there. So, I think it's just kind of go with it and.
So talk about naming Styrofoam Sanchez then, and then deciding to change to Coral Remains.
Yeah. So with that again, that was also a very sort of it was supposed to be one show. We had Jason and I had a project called Nerf Bow, which was basically just trying to make fun of these harsh noise wall people or whatever. And we, it was supposed to be a one show thing. We never really thought about it, because it was like you can never be harder than Merzbow, even though. In retrospect, probably a lot of those guys don't even hate, they think that's like not cool to listen to Merzbow or something anymore. But regardless, and that kind of started as a not serious project. It turned into one, and then Styrofoam Sanchez was a sort of slightly harsher, supposed to be a little less funny, but still sort of tongue-in-cheek version of Nerf Bow with costumes and pulling very much from like Tetsuo the Iron Man sort of aesthetic, and just more of a concept band really about humans and trash sort of hybridizing together over time and coming up with this new sort of species or whatever. So which people are like, oh, it was an environmental project, and it's like, no, that's not really the case. But pulling from some of that stuff, but not, of course the planet is fucked in a lot of ways. We know that, but just using that as a portal jumping off point. So and there was never a lot of thought. I mean, actually, like my old friend, I think she named it. Actually, we didn't even necessarily come up with the name, and it was supposed to be a sort of one-off thing, and then people liked that way more than Nerf Bow, so we decided, okay, well, we'll just go with that because people really responded to it, and that's just what you do. So and we did that, did an LP and did a couple tours, and they all were fairly successful, each one definitely better than the last. And but eventually we changed the name to Coral Remains for a couple different reasons. I mean, it's definitely some people took it the wrong way, and it's not about censorship, but it's if people are reading something into the work that's just not there, then and maybe a little bit of it was there on some sort of afterthought when we came up with the name initially, but it eventually it just became a little bit too gimmicky, and we didn't want to be tied to using only that medium. So I mean, we built a lot of the instruments out of styrofoam, so it was. But so also just at some point it seemed a little too gimmicky, and so we changed the name, and and then we did that project. Went from basically till 2016 to when Ghost Ship Fire happened. And that a whole bunch of people that I knew died in that. Over 17 people, 36 people died altogether. So lots of members of different communities, but all pretty connected with, underground experimental music. Some noise people, some, more techno people, some more sort of shoegaze, but, all within, who would be at the same show, right? So, and I'll just go into that whole thing.
Yeah, that's the next.
Yeah. So I just spared you that I'm having to go into it. But really, it's just about, I think it's really hard for people outside of Oakland to really totally understand all the ways that it sort of affected the scene and just the city in general, and just how the city has used that to sort of crack down on everything else, and sort of really just, because in a lot of ways, really, they were the ones who were responsible. I mean, there's this New York Times article out. It's a terrible article, and the author did a terrible job. They didn't do their research, and it's awful for a lot of ways, for a lot of different reasons. And it does a real haphazard job of trying to explain the sort of conundrum that, underground bands, and especially within electronic music, if you're a band with drums and guitar, and unless it's like super alienating sounding, like, you could pretty much find a venue to play. A lot of that music works good in bars, but quieter stuff, more avant-garde, might not work so good in a bar. So you do need other spaces for this stuff to work, right? So, and again, like with LCM wasn't around anymore. I mean, if LCM hadn't been shut down in the first place, I hate to say it, but, who knows? Ghost Ship, the actual venue, was a real stretch to have a show there. That was like a very last resort, right? I wasn't involved in any way in the planning of that show, but that type of place was, not part of the network of venues that bands would normally play at, that people are familiar with, right? So it was a real sort of fringe element that was really unconnected in a lot of ways. So, and that's the real reason why there was even a show there in the first place, was because there was already inadequate venues to have, to cover the full spectrum of, music and art that was bands that were coming through that needed shows. So that's, and now after that, the city has used it even more as an excuse to shut down even more spaces, evict even more people, evict longtime tenants. Ghost Ship was the worst case scenario come to life. I mean, do I think those guys who, deserve the death penalty? I don't really give a shit. I mean, I don't really believe in prison unless it's just like, violent crime against someone else, but I don't really have much to say about them. I don't really have empathy for them. Well, ultimately the city is the one that, didn't check the space or whatever. There was a lot of different reasons, and a lot of different things had to happen negatively to the scene for them to even have to reach out to that type of space to have a show. So that's why, one of the reasons why also it was so triggering for so many people, aside from the fact that so many creative people were lost, was that the show should have never happened there in the first place. It was a total freak occurrence that it was there. So, it really shows in the worst way, why it's important to have familiarity with the spaces and to have people feel safe and to know, all these things that we take for granted, right, are actually play. You don't think about them until you have to deal with the aftermath. And that's the problem, is that the city never thinks about that stuff until they have to cover their ass. I mean, there's so many different reasons why, that shouldn't have happened. I mean, hundreds of reasons. And most of them aren't on the people going to the show or playing the show, or the people that booked the show, or even the label that booked the show. It's not on them to, I mean, we all take responsibility. If we're in a band, we play in a space. I mean, we played, remember that place we played in New Jersey with As the Sun Sets, where the amps could have fell through the thing and there was, dead cats around? Yeah, I mean,
Sketchy warehouse vibe.
Yeah,
super sketchy.
Totally amazing that we didn't just fall 3 stories down, but you don't think about that stuff because you roll up and this is the gig. I mean, how many times on tour have I rolled up to a place and been like, we might die here, but need that $60, need to sell that merch, so just, you don't think about it. So, yeah, I mean, that's just an example of the worst,
Have you toured since then?
I have not toured since then. No, I'm going to tour.
When you next tour, that's going to be on your mind, though, right?
Oh, yeah. And
and would you refuse a show? Like if you show up to a space now?
I mean, unless it's we actually on the last tour, on the last Core Remains tour, we played this place, the Mudlark Theater in New Orleans. It was a great show, but the whole time Jason was saying this fucking place is a fucking fire trap, because upstairs was this woman's she made like theater curtains by hand, but the place was so fucking dry because there's no humidity there, and so all this dry, super dry, just linen stuff hanging, and the whole time he kept saying this, I'm getting goosebumps talking about it. The whole time Jason was going, this place is gonna fucking burn down. And then 2 days later, after we played, the place burned down.
Oh wow!
There was a show there that night and it burned down. Luckily, no one got hurt. I mean, a few people got hurt, no one died, but yeah, in reality, probably not. Probably do the gig. I mean, my partner just went on tour through Europe, and they were saying that they're in a fairly popular post-punk band, OT, and they were saying that half the spots, the buildings over there, you might play on the 5th floor, and the building's like 600 years old. So with the same wire, like 100-year-old wire or something. So yeah, I think you have to keep going. There's no other option really. I mean, I was either going to shut the label down then or keep doing it for another 20 years. So
you got another 18 to go.
Yeah, I got another 18 to go at least. So
all right.
So what do the DIY spaces look like now?
Pretty bleak. I mean, there's a few that, and like in any place that's sort of modular, a place will pop up, but even like the cafes that we're trying to do a little bit more legitimate, I've been getting cease and desist, so it's really I started doing all the music curating at this place, Pro Arts Gallery, and that's a real, it's like a standard, white wall art gallery with mixed media art shows that's curated by this woman, Natalia Mao, and she's my boss, and she lets me throw shows there, and so it's a little bit more specifically curated than just like your punk band needs a show on January 4th, so come play, but it kind of has to fit in the context of what I'm doing the curating for, but yeah, that's been able to take on a lot of shows and tried to focus more on like.
Also, it's a good guise for the city.
Yeah.
If they see 20 people standing around inside an art gallery, it looks better to the city.
Right, yeah, and so, but I mean, even the rent for that place went up, and so, and the city is always trying to. The city is really, the Oakland, city administration is just, they're pretty awful about just supporting the arts in general and just supporting the. Even the rhetoric they've used around Ghost Ship has been so awful, and they promise a space for people, and it just it'll never happen for so many different reasons. So it's like the local cops telling you they're going to open you a venue, so it's just like,
sure,
yeah, it's not going to happen. So, and if you did, no one would want to fucking hang out there. So it's pretty rough right now, and really, really touch and go, and that will. I mean, in so many ways, that's why I began this rant before by saying people outside really don't understand the impact. And I even saw, venues all across the country. I mean, if I wanted to tour right after Ghost Ship, I couldn't have even, because all my friends' venues around the country where I would have played were getting shut down. So,
sure.
Rhinoceros, all the places that we've played on countless tours are either shut down or under the gun, or getting evicted. So yeah, it's and all that's, and so when your friends' deaths are being used as an excuse to sort of victim blame, and it just gets old after a while. So, but yeah, we're gonna do a lot of touring next year. I'm excited for that.
And so one of the things that you did after the fact, after Ghost Ship, was you put together this compilation, the Rogue Pulse Gravity Collapse compilation, that is 10 CDRs, 185 tracks.
Yeah, I think
really auspicious.
187, some 183. I don't even know the total number, but it's right around
I think it's 185.
All right,
I added it up today.
Awesome. Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So that's a lot of tracks.
Yeah.
And so I'm sure you had no kind of hard time asking people and getting responses.
No, it was pretty easy. I mean, and we were actually already working on that before Ghost Ship happened. And it was going to be for specifically Black Lives Matter and St. James Infirmary. We hadn't gotten very far. We had gotten maybe about 50 people in, but we had gotten some, bigger names and stuff. But once that happened, of course, we said, okay, let's just not think about it for a couple weeks, or maybe we're going to can it, or we don't know. And then it just kind of was like, well, I really need some, it was just time just sort of stopped for a while. But once it got going again, and I just sort of spent a lot of my time doing that. And I think it was...
Do you want to talk about what that was raising funds for? And
yeah, so that raised funds for Black Lives Matter National Bail Fund, which is basically a black militant organization, militant in the sense of, just radically talking about, white supremacy and systems that, they believe are pretty much indisputably in place that disproportionately affect, black people, especially black queer people in different communities in places like Oakland. That's very obvious just through the patterns of gentrification and all that stuff. So that was one of the organizations. St. James Infirmary was another one who does basically advocacy for sex workers, which is also a big... there's Oakland police has a really long history with exploiting sex workers in Oakland. And there's a really famous case, Celeste Glop, which is something that everyone should know about. And so that was this really tragic thing that happened, and so that was sort of a response to that in a lot of ways. And but also once Ghost Ship happened, there were so many people that needed resources that were directly affected by that, and there was a lot of money raised through this organization, Gray Area, but none of it really went to the victims. I mean, some eventually did get there, but it was really bureaucratic and traumatic, so the compilation was, sort of a way to help raise some money for some people outside of that. So, and yeah, people were way down to submit. It took a while to track all the tracks down, but, pretty much everyone was very supportive and, trusted us without really much issue. So that was a lot of fun to put together. Because you said I like making mixes, right? So it was just like a really long mix.
yeah,
It took a really long time to sequence, but...
like 10 mixes.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah, basically 10 mixes,
Yeah. And it ended up like, as much as like it was sort of birthed out of tragedy, it ended up like being a positive. That thing became a positive thing.
Yeah, it did.
And it got some notable like reviews, like the Wire magazine covered it.
Yeah, and people were, people really, because we didn't, we were just like, oh wow, actually this kind of ended up costing a lot. I hope people buy it, but, people were, it raised a good amount of money, and, and we were even to, able to take $1,000 back and put it towards the actual production cost of it. So, it pretty much sold out, and it, raised, we were able to give each organization, about $3,000 or $4,000. So, it went as good as we could have hoped, and, so we're going to do another one, I think.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, because there's a bunch of people that were going to submit tracks, and some pretty big names, but they couldn't get them in time. So, And there's people that couldn't do them for various reasons, but the first one
as big a scale, or is this one going to be maybe?
I don't know. I mean, because I think it's going to be almost as big, probably just as big.
Okay.
Because
I mean, that's big.
But we're not going to make all the fucking CD cases by hand this time. That's what we're not going to do. Because I was like, well, I'll get friends to come over. It won't take that long, but no,
it takes a long time.
It takes a long time, no matter how you cut it. So,
how many copies of that were there?
We ended up doing 350.
Yeah. So times 10.
Times 10, yeah. So
yeah,
a lot. Yeah.
That's a lot.
A lot of glue. I think it was like $200 in glue or something.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, that's slight exaggeration, but it was up there. It was definitely over 100. So, but I mean, honestly, in a lot of ways, like, it was very meditative in a way, and
you're happy how it came out.
Yeah. I mean, it didn't come out 100% perfect, but
whatever does.
Yeah.
Release wise,
there was. I was like, I'm going to make a video for every track. And I had, people that would have been great, to work with, but I just, couldn't get it together. Because, like, once it was out, I was like, I never want to.
A video for every track would be something.
Yeah. And I started pairing people up. And then at some point, I had to just be like, all right, everybody, I think it's done really well. So we'll just leave it at that. But, I had. I talked to Scott Kelly, and I said, I sent him a styrofoam video, and he said, this is beautiful, if, about doing some videos with some of the artists, and but I just never followed up. So that was some not missed opportunities, but we could have pushed it farther, but I think people were supporting it as it was, and so we just kind of let it fly.
The press you did receive was all positive and not ambulance chasing. I think before the microphones were turned on, we were talking about how Rolling Stone was hassling you to do a feature on your band, but for the wrong reasons shortly afterwards. So that's nice.
Yeah, it was. And I think, the people that did cover it, I think were, with press, it's like, the more that you sort of put your stuff out there, the more you sort of, the more it comes back. But you do have to think about this stuff. It's just like, well, if they put too much of their own take in there, you want it to really just be just a representation of what you're trying to do, right? They have a little bit of opinion and all that is good, but I think it's good to also just sometimes let the thing breathe. And with something like this, everyone wants to chime in about it. I mean, I had NBC, CBS, all these places calling me, and you just want to be like, call me in a year, and we could, you could come videotape some of the bands, and look, they're so cute, they have tapes, and that could be the whole story. It doesn't need to be, but you just see how that machine is just fueled by trauma and tragedy and exploitation. So
absolutely.
And how that stuff spills over into the music industry even, and so and artwork, and so it's like I think that's why Black Mirror has such a visceral reaction to a lot of people, is because it's so current, and you can almost like see it right before it happens, and then when it happens, it's just as disturbing as you thought, and if not worse. And that's what it was like when all that was happening, because now all of a sudden Rolling Stone wants to, I was like, we're just trying to get the review in your whatever Pitchfork little mailing list or whatever. Who cares? You just want to have the people see something that's out there, right? But you don't want to use your friend's death to sort of peddle this stuff. So I think it's, I was very reserved and very sort of, it was a weird like double-edged sword, because you want to raise money for these organizations, but at the same time you like really see how easily these places sort of take away the agency of whoever is involved in these things, and that becomes pretty dark. So
it seems like you made the right choices.
Yeah, the person in The Wire did it. I thought she did a beautiful job of really just saying it for what it is, and not disrespecting basically the families and the people that got lost by trying to just bump it's like, this is news, we have to work it into what we do, so it just gets tired. That's all.
So what are you personally working on now? What name are you going under? What style is it?
So I have a couple different projects now. One is False Nun, which is in some ways probably some continuation of Coral Remains, a little bit of the sound, very harsh, industrial, beat oriented. That's also has a really large performance and video component. So working on a film for that, and then actually going to be putting out 2 Coral Remains records from some stuff that we were working on before Jason died. And then, so those are going to come out, both of those are going to come out this year. And then we're going to do one more, which is...
Are you releasing those?
We're releasing 2 of them, and then another label is going to be releasing. We're doing one that's going to be split with Bastard Noise that someone else is going to release. So, and that'll be like the whole scope of basically.
That one you've been working on for like a long time.
That one we've
right?
been working on for a long time. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that'll finally come out. And then also have another project, Cyborg Eye, which is more a little bit less harsh, but that's like sort of a duo that's like all over the place, some sort of Italian horror style to almost like digital hardcore in a way, pretty much all over the place. That's a lot of fun. And then solo Malacolsian, been working on a concept album ever since Ghost Ship, which is basically a 36-hour album, which is basically supposed to be a sonic interpretation of the first 36 hours after the fire. So that's about half done. I have like, and I mean, some of it's really long form, stripped down ambient. Some of it's almost like metal. It's really all over the place. So that's going to be, and then I'll probably stop doing solo stuff for a while, I think, because just to focus on these other projects. So, and then OSC, me and Ross have a recording thing we've been trying to do. And then I have another duo called Latch, which we just recorded a thing that's going to come out sometime next year that someone else is putting out. So yeah, and then a bunch of Ratskin releases, Beast Nest LP, La Sucias LP, which is like a feminist reggaeton industrial duo. Pretty phenomenal stuff. Also out of Oakland. Gonna be doing a Tyler Holmes LP, which is an artist we've done a couple tapes of. Some all super short editions, but
the visual stuff is really cool for that.
Yeah, and the music's gonna be actually also pretty stripped down. It has some pretty dark electronic, and then also like some almost like basically just singing and acoustic guitar. But just, yeah, it still has a sort of heavy darkness to it. So, and yeah, and you know, but they're always changing up their sound. So it's kind of like, but you know, trusting them enough to say, well, we hope we'll like it, and they haven't disappointed yet. So, LP from them, the Core Remains LP. Then a bunch of tapes, couple a 7-inch, couple lathes, and yeah, some more records in the future. Doing a Head Boggle CD. I'm really excited about that. That's like neoclassic, pretty much neoclassical, avant-garde. I don't even know how to describe it. Pretty unique sounding record. Maybe B-Mask would be like one of the only things, or has some Robert Ashley in there probably, but aside from that, it's pretty hard to make a comparison. So yeah.
Ross, while you're here, why don't you tell us everything you're involved in right now?
Play some drums in a few bands, Mountain Movers and Headroom, and then basically I just have a bunch of ideas about just doing stuff by myself and slowly working on. It's tough.
How's the
But you're doing loose trucks
how's
too. That's
the-
another.
Yeah, that's sometimes the loose trucks.
And then
You
your
go
your
loosey-goosey.
Ross Menze project, your techno stuff. How's that going? Is that a standstill?
Kind of slow. I don't get to jam as much as I like. Got a lot of recording to do, some gear to figure out, but I really enjoy doing that. Have a nice little setup now in my house, so just gotta be diligent, keep working. That's about it. Nothing too crazy right now.
Do you ever
Been a
feel
little
like
slow.
you're trapped by the drums? Because I feel that for you.
Josh will often tell people how drums are not your main instrument.
I think you're a guitar guy, and I think that you're really good at it. And I think that because you play drums in a world where people don't play enough drums, you might get stuck behind the drums.
I think that the reason people like having me play drums for them is because I can play guitar and other things.
Sure.
I
I mean,
think
don't
that-
get me wrong. You're one of my favorite drummers to watch. Certainly my favorite locally. Like that goes without saying. But I think that, you know, I feel that there's a song in your heart.
There's songs. I'm a song guy. Definitely a song
sure.
person. Yeah, there's a lot going on in my head. Just a lot of work to do. Lucky that I have so much going on in my head, you know. But playing drums is awesome. I like it. Shout out to my dad for teaching me how to play drums, my mom for teaching me how to play guitar, and a lot of extended family that plays music. So
So how do you think of yourself instrument wise? Like, do you think of the drums as your main instrument, or do you think just no, that's just what I do?
I'm proud of playing drums, but I guess I don't really think of it like that's the main. I don't know, you know, just play music. I guess I'm a musician.
You are a musician.
All right.
Such a dirty word.
Sure.
You've been in multiple projects for the last 20 plus years. You never have one singular project. There's been times where I've known you to be in 5 active bands.
That's when it gets rough. Yeah.
Yeah, the fact
It's
that
rough with one.
yeah. So you know, as much as I bust your balls, I'm very proud of you too.
I appreciate that.
What you got?
Anything you want to mention, Mikey, that we haven't touched on?
Oh yeah. So like in this inevitable, like you get pushed out of your neighborhood off your block, and you got to move back home. You feel that you could integrate back into the world here? Or
Yeah,
no?
yeah, I think so. I mean, you know, I might have to do some, you know, yeah.
Is that a real worry, or like?
You talked about it last year. When you
Yeah,
came
well,
on.
I mean, it's always sort of looming. I mean, yeah, I mean, it's something you think about. I mean, I'm fairly locked in at my space, but I mean, anything could happen at any time. You know,
I mean,
but-
2007 or so, your rent in San Francisco was what, $2,500 for a small apartment, or more than that?
No, well, that was for a 4-bedroom, and we had anywhere between 2 and 4 people living there. So yeah, but now I'm paying. I have pretty cheap rent right now. Like,
what I'm getting at was like if the San Francisco like gentrification rates start to affect Oakland in such a way.
oh, they already have for sure.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
if you just get priced out of the city and you had to move home, do you feel like you could integrate into this world that, you know, is going on around here?
I think
as
I could.
easily?
I think I could to some degree, but it's also a very different focus, and you know, so I would have to. It would probably take me a while to, you know, be like it did take me a while over there to really.
See, that's more to my point, is that I don't think it took you that long. I don't think it took you that long to become sort of a mover and a shaker in a specific scene in a very large city. So to the point where you have, you know, you mentioned 30 plus projects tonight that you're working on to try and get out within the next year or two.
Right.
So what that's all I'm getting at is like, you know.
Well, I think of that too. I mean, and although right now I'm working with a lot of artists from Oakland, but I mean, you know, the label, I mean, I could do it theoretically from anywhere, and I would be happy if I need to move into my sister's basement or whatever, then, you know, maybe that's not necessarily where I want to be at age 35, but if it needs to happen, then, you know, I don't want to stifle my creative projects because of that. And I think and I think really too, I mean, at some point, I think places that maybe aren't places that are just in a different place, like politically, it's a good idea to have. I think it's always a good idea to mix it up. So I think like if I had done the label here the whole time, it would be a very different experience. Like it would be, I'd be working with, of course, much different artists, and and I think it's always about the sound but also the philosophy too. So I think I could do that from more or less anywhere. But yeah, I mean, so I'm gonna tough it out, but at some point, yeah, it's probably gonna have to make some sort of change for sure. So I mean, there's no equity, like you can't save up to, even if I wanted to try to open a legit venue, it's pretty much impossible out there,
Yeah.
So,
I mean, yeah, especially in the climate. What are the record stores you're liking out there right now?
I like Econojam Records. About the same, maybe a little bit bigger, but probably about the same size. They've always been really supportive of us, and just local labels in general. Vamp, which is another kind of like half boutique store, half sort of vintage boutique stuff, and but actually has some really great records for really inexpensive. And Aquarius was a long-time staple. They've been sort of taken over by Stranded, Superior Viaduct, which I don't really care for. So no shout out to them. Because while they have released some really interesting music, or reissued rather, I like a record store where you go in and while the staff may have a sort of, maybe they have more knowledge about music in general or what's new or what's interesting to them, you can still feel like you could browse and sort of, you feel fairly comfortable and like you could obtain information about at least half the records that are in there if you wanted to, but if not, you could just peruse. And so yeah, I just like to feel comfortable in a record store. So because if not, I'll just order it online, so I really think that and of course I want to support brick and mortar businesses because I think that's important, but so those may not have the widest selection. Of course, there's Amoeba and all those, and Rasputin, but so yeah, I would say Econojam. There's 1 2 3 4 Go. They're pretty interesting too. But yeah, Aquarius was a lot of fun, but unfortunately they're no more, and they were great because for better or for worse they did write reviews, and I think that's really important.
It's nearly impossible. I don't know how you could be working and writing like the amount of reviews.
And they weren't like 200-word reviews. They were like 1,000 plus. I mean, they were not.
They got in depth.
Yeah,
they did get in depth. I mean, so. And aside from Redscroll, they were one of the first record stores to ever buy anything from Ratskin. So I mean, but yeah, the store that took them over had a policy of no flyers in the store. So
strange. That's a very strange.
Yeah, and they actually said it wasn't supporting local music wasn't in their business model. So
that's a weird. That's a weird business model.
Yeah, so Steve Viaduct, yeah, he they know I don't fuck with them. So but aside, but I do think those are. I think in the age of everybody being broker, you really have to support not everybody has a lot of disposable income, so the places that I support I want to be also philosophically aligned with, and also know that they are support the artist directly and all that stuff. So those sort of affect my decisions of like buying records much more than like tracking down a specific record, so
sure,
because we all know how to do that, but yeah. I think it matters where you spend your money. That's the main thing I'm trying to get at. So,
Respect.
Yeah, anything we didn't touch on you want to talk about?
no, I think we're pretty good. Yeah, we went over new releases for next year. Maybe could I just do a couple quick plug or just
Sure.
the website or?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, that's my next question if you weren't going to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, I just I'm gonna be doing a bunch of new releases next year. Also, some more expanded releases that are sort of gonna bridge the gap between like a release and a book and a sculptural object. So, some more limited sort of in tribute to like early American tape stuff, but a little bit more of a contemporary take, hopefully. So lots of new stuff coming out next year. Just www.ratskin.org. Also, ratskinrecords.bandcamp.com is good. You could stream all the releases for free. Download a handful of them for free. Yeah, I think that's it. Lots of new records and tapes coming out next year.
Thanks for coming on.
Thank you. Love you guys. Thank you.
Love you, Mikey.
Bye-bye.
All right, yeah, subscribe to Redscroll.
I'm grinning underneath you, groom me bigger than the life I see. When you form your hands to grip me, know that never let me breathe. Shell game running back to back, curtsy to the slave in me. Shell game crowd on its back, pander to the slave in me. Shell game run down my back. You're what is left that's free.